Welcome to Talking in Stations. I am Matterall. This podcast is about EVE Online, and today we're going to explore the Chinese time zone, and we'll meet a special guest, Wind Spirits, in a little bit. First, I want to say hello to our panel, and that is Carneros.
Good morning, or good afternoon.
Yeah, and Keskora.
Hi, good morning, everybody.
Yeah, so today I'm not in Los Angeles as usual. I am actually broadcasting from near the Sequoia National Forest, where I have some family, and I'm at a farm there inside of their offices. And as Jinn'Taan was, the trophy behind me is my Matani participation trophy.
Every member of 9N gets one.
That's right. Everybody
you just have to show it, and your freighter won't get ganked. I promise.
Yeah.
and they'll go and they'll take out the fake stations for you afterwards. It's cleanup.
Yeah, a little cleanup. So that's what's going on. That's why it might look a little bit different today. But how have you been, Carneros, after doing a couple of really cool shows for Push to Talk?
Oh, thank you. Those were a lot of fun. Those guys are a hoot.
Yeah.
It's going well.
And those shows talk about your professional life as a producer for video games, specifically Eve. I almost said Eve, but you were.
Yeah, but it's mostly about the industry and not just about my experience. It's we ramble about all kinds of games, old ones, current ones, what's coming next. It's fun.
Yeah, worth a listen. Keskora, what have you been up to?
Well, I got evicted. So I've been a little busy with that.
We should say not in real life.
Not in real life. No, I'm still in my same house with my blue wall. But we had a crazy fight 2 weeks ago. I was on here, and there's the last episode or 2 weeks episode covered that crazy fight.
Yeah.
And we were hoping that we could restock and hold out if there was a second round, and there was, and they brought in even more people than before, and it got to the point where real life was catching up with all of us, and we just needed to do the best we could, but we couldn't put in the same kind of effort that we had the previous weeks. We were I think all of the wives of my guys were like getting really pissed at this point that they've been spending so much time playing Eve.
Yeah.
So we ended up losing all our structures, but we're moving into a new home this weekend, and things are kicking off. My guys have been so great, and it's just so cool to see everyone come together like that. Yeah. Like how everyone's been so supportive and all helping out. And so even though we might have lost the final battle, like I feel really pretty good about the way we showed everybody how we can stand up to such a big force. So
cool. We'll find out what's
down and out, but it's going well.
We'll find out what's next for you guys at the end of the show when we do a news wrap up. But that's cool. I'm glad you were around today. So we also want to introduce today Jinn'Taan from the CSM.
Actually, yeah, it's surprising to hear you not say from CVA, but yeah, part of test now. As you correctly identified, I've been moving my playtime a little bit away from actually playing EVE Online and in terms of seeing and making more videos and doing more CSM work. So that's been good fun for the past couple of weeks. I'm a little burnt out after the whole Providence campaign, but I'll get back to it after FanFest, I think.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we want to talk about CSM later because that is coming up quick. So we'll see what's up there. And for today, we're going to introduce Wind Spirits, who is the CEO of Fraternity. And he's here to clear up a lot of questions that have come up from the EVE metasphere about what the Chinese are up to, because there seem to be a lot of them joining up, and we started seeing them bring out fleets and contend in a very big way, especially in the south there. So yeah, hi Wind Spirits, how are you?
Good evening, guys. Good evening, audience.
We know it's really late for you, so thanks for staying up super late. You're located where?
I'm located in Shanghai.
Awesome.
Beautiful
All right, well,
city. Beautiful city.
Actually, we should also say that Carneros, you spent some time in China, right?
Yeah, I lived there years and years ago, but I've also gone back to visit the Shanghai offices of CCP, and a couple other places. It's changed a lot over the years. The downtown area is beautiful. It's a huge city, very impressive. If you're going to live in China, Shanghai is definitely some place to consider. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I always don't fancy big cities. I like more remote areas, like where David is living right now. So that's what I would prefer when I retire, and I'll definitely go somewhere like that.
Well, when you're back in California, you can come visit the farm. We'll go see the sequoia trees, that are these giant
Definitely.
hobbit-like.
Summer,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, in the summer. Cool. All right. So you're a very interesting film, Wind Spirits. But why don't you tell us how you got started in Eve and a little bit of your history?
Sure. It was, I think, back in 2002, 2003. I was moved over from a game called Earth and Beyond. I think I got that name right. It's another spaceship game. And then I played that. I enjoyed the sci-fi content of it. And then when Eve came out, I paid very close attention to its development. And then I was playing also the alpha and the beta test of Eve. And then I start off basically right on the first day.
So you were there from the beginning.
Yes.
Wow.
And basically.
Yeah, that game that you came from is the same game that Scarlet came from, and the same game that Sir Mole came from. And so a lot of the early Eve players were people that were coming over from that game.
If I remember correctly, wasn't Evolution a transplant effectively from?
Yeah, it was.
Earth and Beyond. Yeah, it's crazy to hear how important that game, Earth and Beyond, was to the development of Eve's culture, because we see so much of the cultural touchstones come from that game. Something that I really hope Andrew Groen actually looks into at some point. It's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah,
definitely.
What was happening in that game that made you want to? You were just keeping an eye on Eve, but when it broke, it seemed like a bigger universe to conquer, or what was the attraction?
Well, I actually I only played that game for maybe, I think, 4 months. Definitely it's different from other RPG game, of course. I played a few other ones, but back then I was basically strictly RTS player. So I play real-time strategy game mostly. And this kind of MMO RPGs, just games that I kind of get tired of strategy game and then go on break for a couple of months, and then I go back to strategy game. So when Eve first started, I only played 2 months because there's really nothing to do besides mining. And there's only few ships. The market is still very, in a very amateur phase. So it wasn't that attractive. So I played it for a couple months, and then I went AFK until 2007. That's when I really start playing the game.
2007. Okay, yeah, that's when a lot of stuff was starting to happen, and the reputations were starting to be made for the spy game and the meta game and all that was starting to happen. I think early on in Eve there was a lot of trying to figure out what Eve was, and it wasn't probably until 2006 and 7 that it really started to take a different form that was out there, because people were starting to play in the game and above the game. And making it, very interesting. They're leveraging a lot of their real life into it at that point and stuff. So, what was your first when you started out? What was the first, milestone for you that you want to talk about?
Well, I was just regular line members. Maybe it started back in about 2009, 2010. When I joined the Blay Alliance back then. It was basically a sister alliance of BOB. And I was there. There's two Chinese corporation within the alliance. So I wasn't in the Chinese corporation, but in another corporation. But I do the communication between the leadership of the corporation and the alliance. leadership. So that's when I start, doing this kind of political works, and then it kind of built me a lot of friendship, both on the Chinese group here in Global Server and also with several of the FCs and leadership of Play.
What was the relationship like between the two Chinese corps? Were they friends?
Friends, but they are not really collaborating with each other that much. One is basically active more in low sec, and then one is in LSAC base. So they talk to each other, but not in a. They don't have OP, not in a weekly, monthly basis. No. So back then there were, I think, more than 100 Chinese players on the global server, way more, I would say, but they just scatter all across EVE. And there was, I think, 2 to 3 times they tried to come together and then put together an alliance, but it only lasts for like 2-3 months and it immediately broke apart.
Wow. So we'll skip ahead to 2010-ish, where did you bring together your first alliance then?
2012, yes, it was Pangu. It was, I would say, on the global server, our 4th or 5th try of bringing together an alliance. And I was leading with 3 other Chinese players. And at the end, it was after just a couple of weeks, it was, again, just me left in the leadership, either when either AFK or got pissed off because of some other members like before, and then they left. So I ended up leading the alliance by myself, mainly, for roughly 6 to 8 months. So that was the first time I was doing something other than just being a F1 monkey, I guess.
Yeah. And Jinn'Taan, do you have something to add?
Yeah, one of the things I've always found kind of interesting about Fraternity is up until very, very recently, they were, as far as I was aware, an NPC nullsec alliance. And you guys, like, how I first found out about you guys was from your appearances in the alliance tournament. Is that something you're involved in?
I actually tried to get into the last one. I was disqualified on the last 15 minutes before the match start because I was just transferred back from NC back to Fraternity because you guys had this, what is it? I kind of missed out the entire war of removing goons from the north. So I was like, oh, that sounds like a fun event. So I got in, but it was just structure grinding. So that wasn't, it was, I think, 2 years ago. I don't remember.
Yeah.
So
around this time.
Yeah. So it was not too entertaining as I thought it should be. So I just went to NC for a couple of months, and then when I came back to the game last May, I joined back into a Fraternity. And yes, like you said, back then they are mainly just an NPC alliance.
I think calling them an NPC alliance is a bit harsh. Definitely a bit better than...
Yeah, we had experience in Sovereignty before. That was when I started Fraternity back in 2013. We were holding Sov around Curse, and we were participating in the Halloween Wall. And after that, I went AFK for basically 3 years. And then between then and then now, basically there was 3-4 other people that end up leading Fraternity for a month up to a year, and they all try to do different things. I appreciate it. They put in great effort to keep the community alive.
Oh, okay.
So how does it kind of feel to be in charge of what's probably the fastest growing power in EVE Online?
It is an interesting experience, I would say, that when I came back last May, I basically see the trend already. I think people told me before, asking me to come back because people from Serenity server was flooding into the global server. And when I came back and I see what's going on, I wasn't really happy about it because there are definitely a lot of players coming to the Tranquility server, but they were not staying long. They were just here for a couple of weeks or month, and they when they don't build a connection with the world here, they basically either go back to Serenity or just go AFK or play some other game. So I see a lot of potential to build the Chinese community into a greater power, but the leadership back then just wasn't clicking the right button. So I told them basically, why not give me a try again? And then that's what I did for the last 6-8 months.
You've done exceptionally well in that position. You talk about players kind of coming from Serenity to TQ. Can you, I know you don't play on Serenity, but can you talk a little bit about why that is? Have you been able to talk to your members about it at all?
You mean why are they coming over from Serenity?
Yeah, why are they leaving?
Well, that server is just unplayable. I will, for someone who never play on the Serenity server, it's hard to imagine because they are only playing half of Eve. That's how I would put it, because it's just everyone playing in one time zone. So a lot of the fundamental game mechanics kind of breaks down.
Right.
And
so
then everyone is speaking the same language, obviously, and it's very easy to just have spy all over the place. I guess now it's not that difficult here on Tranquility also, but so the server is just kind of the economy system is also kind of weird compared to Tranquility. So it's just more like a private server where things are just, they don't know that because that's the only server they've been played on. But when they come to the global server, they see, so this is quite different.
Yeah, it's kind of weird to hear you talk about time zones because I never thought about that.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff.
I will try to put it shortly. So there's basically not that many software. When the server started back in 2004, 2005, the major big power went into the space where they were in right now, and they basically stayed there until now. So basically, there wasn't a change hand in terms of soft, not in this kind of big scale that happened in Eve in the past 10, 15 years. So it's just one alliance trying to go to war against another alliance, and then you have a 500-man fleet on one side, and then maybe 300 on the other side, and then the 300 ones stand down for the first day, for the second day, for the third day, and then they just give up and then set all the timers to midnight, and then that's it. There's no drive to kind of invade into another person's soft, because soft grinding 4 a.m. in the morning is just not attractive content to players. And then there's not that big drive to get more soft because of the population density on that server is much lower compared to Tranquility. So basically, it's more like a static space for the last 10, 15 years.
Oh, interesting. And it recently got dominated. Was it recently that it got dominated by one that now it just sits on top of everybody?
Yeah, just one PIBC Corp alliance that won a huge, gigantic super cap battle, and then that's it. Basically, there wasn't really that major of a resistance that came afterwards. So basically, the universe is relatively still since it was, I think, 2014.
Yeah, it's been pacified. So then there is more players coming from that server and or China in general lately. That's not just an illusion. There are more people coming. In the last year, there have been more people coming?
Yeah, I would say since 2015, 2016. That was back when I was still AFKing from Halloween War, that I heard that, there's a huge population boost to the Curse Chinese community player-based alliance. So there's several groups of people that came here, played, and then they go AFK, but new people come in. So we kept a pretty good number around Curse until when I came back and started leading the alliance again.
Now, why around Curse? Is there anything specific about Curse?
Yes, kind of. It's what we have figured out, basically, me and a few other leadership people, that we tried to go much deeper into NELSEC, into player-based NELSEC, but for a Chinese-only alliance, it's very difficult to keep the player, especially the PvP players, active between wars, basically. And so if we go and live too deep into the NELSEC space, then the content will be very dry. And then another difficulty is that all the Chinese players, including the FC, they're not good at communicating with the outside world. So it will become even more difficult for them to participate in quality contents. So you start to reach a bottleneck of population really quickly, and then you kind of just stay there. You try to recruit 50 people before that will leave. So you just have a very low bottleneck of player base. But living somewhere in like Curse, you keep because a lot of alliance come here for vacation, right? So it's much easier to keep an active player base here, especially for this Chinese player. They can just make a few jumps and then get into a reasonably big fight. So especially when I go FK, the leadership think that this is where the Chinese people can stay and still have fun, instead of just go somewhere ratting and then get a few super can and go AFK. So this is actually the place we have learned to basically call home.
Interesting. It's also a lot of it's the birthplace of a lot of big alliances over the years. If you look at some of the groups in what is it, Arcane Technology, or ATUC was started there, and the Red Alliance and Solar all started in Curse, and so it's interesting that it's kind of been a place of a lot of growth. And I guess it's because you're right, people vacation there, so there's always smaller things to do, and you don't need to have you don't need to have a bat phone to call people in to help you out and stuff. Which is what you're saying is, one, you're near activity because you have people near your same time zone, Russians, I guess, and then when you have a language barrier to be called in to participate in other people's fights, you can only rely on your own fights, and Curse provides that on a more consistent basis.
Yes, definitely, that's right.
Curse is also an incredible region geographically because it's so close to so many good places for just like small gang roaming, that it provides amazing content. Like, you're always going to have people in Catch. Catch is a central point in nullsec. There will always be people moving through it. You're near Providence when Providence has Provi in it. That's just easy kills some percentage of the time. You're close to Scalding Pass and Innsmother, which is ratting grounds for the DRF. Historically has always, those regions have always historically been like ratting centric regions. So Curse has always been the place to be for a small alliance that wants to fight above its weight. And that's why you see so many good alliances come out of Curse.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. So lately, though, so you guys have made a splash. There's a lot of people who were very interested in, is this the rise of a new time zone? You call it what? What do you call the time zone?
I call it Asia time zone. A rise, I would say that definitely. I wasn't sure back in last May when I came back and started leading the alliance. Back then there wasn't a coalition, and then a few groups you see today that is big Chinese wise. They started only with 2-3 players. So back then I wasn't too sure what this group of Chinese people will become, because I never played again. I never played on Serenity server. So I started to get to know them. And then I tried the different things to see what kind of content they're interested. And slowly, basically, we grow to the size we are today. And which is, I think we can still grow bigger, maybe up to around 3 max fleet, subcat fleet wise. That's the size I think I'm aiming for today still. But not sure how long I can hold it together. That's also one thing.
So you're saying that your aim for Fraternity is to get 750 people online for like big fights?
Not Fraternity, coalition. We have a coalition now.
Right. Sorry. That's pretty
What's the coalition?
You mean the name? We call us our Winter Coalition. That's the name.
Nice.
But who's in it?
There's maybe 8 different alliances. There's 4 major Chinese alliance, and there's also a Japanese Korean alliance right now. We also try to recruit a few EU and US time zone cooperation into our group, but it's still kind of in the testing phase.
That's funny to cover your time zone, right? You need to recruit some Western groups.
Yeah, originally
I like that because it's the reverse.
Yeah, originally my idea was to just have triumvirate do all the work in other off time zone for us, but now since they are not that strong anymore, not at this moment, I think they will slowly come back in the future. So I guess we need to have a few more population in the off time zone so we can do some different strategy. Having everyone in just one time zone can be quite tedious sometimes.
Yeah, I love the idea of it being the reverse of looking for Australian alliances to join so you can shore up your Aussie time zone or your Russian time zone. So I love that it's the reverse of that now.
What would you say is your biggest challenge right now? Either for you or for Fraternity or for Winter?
Biggest challenge is still to find quality and quantity contents. Because we are still, even with a bigger Chinese population here on global server, the Chinese time zone contents are still relatively dry. Whatever you guys do in other time zone, we have to go twice the distance just to get the same amount of content. So that is very stressful on the leadership and the FC team. So for me, I prefer us in almost a constant war state, not just content deployment, but active war, because only war that can force your enemy to at least try to fight you in your time zone. If I just give you an example, let's say if I form a 50-man Matterall fleet and then go out, maybe you'll find some content in our time zone, maybe not. There's bigger chance during weekend. But imagine if I'm trying to keep 2 max subcat fleet alive. I need to have a war. If I don't have a war for 2-3 months, people will start AFKing, not subscribing, and whatever is left. Maybe you don't see the alliance members dropping in terms of number, but what is left is the AFK, the people, PvP players that went AFK and play other games, and then what you left is just 8 oracles mining. So that doesn't really display the strength of the coalition. Even the number is still there.
That's a really interesting kind of realpolitik point. We don't often hear alliance leaders talk about the difficulty of keeping players engaged and how that can lead to conflict. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
In recent times, I don't know if you've been aware, the Imperium has had the Space Violence SIG visiting in your area over in Curse. Has that been fun for you guys?
Yeah, you're welcome. Right.
Yes and no. I guess. How do I put it? I never joined the goons, so I'm not exactly sure how the FC team and the PvP players work within goons. What I get a feeling is that it still went back to my original point. It was fun for a few fights, but is there some kind of this kind of kill ratio system I heard about that is supposed to be running between these goon FCs that you cannot lose a fight too badly. So when the fight is not in their favor, they don't seem to be willing to always engage. That's how I feel.
That's what's called wanting to win all your fights.
There's no rule. There's no rule about it, but they do usually if they usually only take the fights that they think they have at least a chance of winning, or everyone just says, I don't care, I want to throw away this ship, let's go.
Mm-hmm. So it ended up to my members, at least it feels like there was a few fights that was fun. There was definitely more fun fights back last year in May, when we are still relatively small. Back then we can form maybe 100 to 150 man fleet at most, maybe with people do boxing. But now, if I really call like a major OP or CTA a day ahead, I can get 500 subcaps. And it's a little bit difficult for Space Violent. Even Space Violent combining with I-90, you guys are still kind of short in terms of number. Until maybe you bring more reinforcements from Delph, which can be tedious for you guys to burn all the way up here. So it wasn't really fair fight for you guys if you guys always take the fight. So it ended up you guys just playing, I guess, more this kind of selfie, dropping on rat and carrier, those kind of gameplay. So that wasn't too fun, at least not for the PvP players.
I think Imperium's getting called out, which is great.
Getting roasted for not taking fights.
I'm not saying they're not wolfy
diplomat.
but yeah, they're just like kind of under number. That's why
it's like the most diplomatic way of calling your enemies cowards I've ever heard. Like, holy shit, that's so great.
You can ask their FCI, even combo them and say that, well, if you are short in numbers, why not ask tests and you guys can gank up on me so we can have more leveled field. But it doesn't seem like goons like tests.
We'll loan you some of our guys.
Test maybe a chance.
we got some extra guys. We'll put them on your team, and then we'll fight. Test and I don't know what's going on between Test and Imperium, but we'll pick that up a different time. But so you guys how are you now? Like, what are things like right now with because it looks like you lost a bunch of members. Was that just cleaning the roles of inactives, like 1,800?
That is just we have one corporation that is something like 1,500, 2,000 members, but they have like 5 active members. So they basically recruit since 4 or 5 years ago, and there's like an internal their policy that they don't kick anyone. Everyone that joined, even for 2 days, is considered like a family. So they're not allowed to remove members. But right now, it's just that corporation isn't even active anymore. So we kind of do some member cleaning, and we didn't lose any active members. So those are just people that went AFK, and if they come back, they're welcome to join our ranks again. So an apology about my voice. I am still kind of recovering from my fever.
Oh, that's all right. Also, it's really late. Carneros?
You sound great. Your English is great. Fantastic. You sound great. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
I actually kind of have a question talking about getting players in. And you talked about how that can be a problem, especially keeping it there. How do you feel about the hacked way of getting a Chinese localization that I'm aware of getting removed? Is that going to impact you guys in a negative manner? And do you think that CCP should be working on, making a Chinese localization, given how fast your that demographic is growing? Do you think it would help?
Definitely, that will help. There was some big drama discussion that went on the Chinese Reddit, basically discussing about CCP removing that. I wasn't sure how big the impact was, and now that has been clear for a week now, and our member base didn't drop by that much. So to me, I talked to the leadership that if this is gonna be, it's definitely going to be a negative impact for sure. But what I told the leadership is that many of them basically came to me that, okay, we're gonna lose half of our active members, and it's time to basically shrink our space and then just guard those key system things like that. But I kind of have a completely different way of thinking. So I told them basically that since that is going to be a negative impact on the Chinese community, we as leaders need to do more to create more fun and active content for the members, so they have more reason to stay in the games instead of going AFK or go play other games. So I told them that you should fleet out and take fights more often, since we are at a disadvantage right now because of the language localization.
All right, thank you. Also, earlier you talked about. I'm sorry, Matterall. I know I'm basically taking over your job here.
I love this, and it's totally fine. We're gonna put you on a crew and make you part of the panel because you're doing great. Go ahead.
Great.
I don't want to get in the way.
Yeah, you talked about like earlier. You're running these CTAs. You know, you're running big 500-man fleets, and for me, that's always been about massive objectives. You know, Fortizar time as Keepstar times, and I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on how the structured time zone tanking has impacted that kind of content for you. Because we hear a lot about it from the Western point of view. But I don't know how it affects the Chinese players.
Are you talking about the recent patch that kind of...
Just the mechanics in general, like how it works by locking people into a time zone. Because you're surrounded by a US entity in Catch, you know, that's Test and Brave and all that. Do you find it hard to get fights because of that? Do you feel like it's not giving you what you need to grow as an alliance?
I'm not sure how deep I can go into that topic, because that will definitely reveal some of my key strategy objectives even in the coming weeks. But in general,
Totally
yes.
understand. Don't dox you. Don't
Yeah.
break your plans over there. Not
Yeah,
trying to get you to do that, mate.
Yes, if people don't want to take fight against us, they would definitely just time for some ridiculous timer, 5 a.m. in the morning, and we won't be able to show up with more than 50 men. So for structured timers like citadels and this kind of timers, it's very easy to avoid because the timer is just one set, fixed hour. But for other things such as stations and iHubs, there are ways to work around it. And I guess that's what I'm good at, actually. I'm good at kind of forcing the enemies to fight on my terms, basically. So I have ways to kind of maneuver around the time zone to try to get as much time PvE contents into my time zone instead of just fighting kind of midnight, having to wake up. That's not good for the FC, not for their families, not for their wives. No, you create huge family things like I talked on the show before that there were actually FC that went through several divorces, not just one, two divorces because of over involving in Eve. So I don't want to have that.
Wow.
Man.
All right, so we Westerners aren't alone in that.
Yeah, definitely. Do you have a wife though? Maybe like here, our family kind of forced us to get married, at the age of 12 or something like that. So
yeah.
Thankfully not, basically. A lot of our kind of younger players, like myself, tend to be the FCs, actually, don't have families. We probably barely have university to attend to.
yeah,
Well, that's one of the places you can get involved if you have, being good at the game. And when you can't get involved, you become someone who analyzes the game. No shame in it. Yeah. So, Jin'Taan, do you have any other questions and stuff? Because you're somebody that's asked or probed in this area for a while, and so it's good to bring you on because you would have some. This would be a good combination. So you asking questions is terrific. If you have any others.
Yeah, I've mostly been probing around about Serenity because I've always been totally fascinated by the Serenity server because it's an example of what Eve could have been like if it didn't have that Earth and Beyond culture instilled in it of wanting to fight and being very PvP focused. I see Serenity as kind of what Eve would have naturally become if it had no outside cultural influences. That's my working theory, at least. I could obviously be entirely bullshit, as most of my theories tend to be.
Hey, what do you mean the way it would have become? Like just a pacified sci-fi virtual world?
Yeah, I mean, we see this constantly with Eve, where it goes into these periods where it's locking up and it looks like the Blue Donut's going to finally win and there's never going to be any wars again. And then, bam, out of nowhere, we see the same kind of things happen. We see this new power come up and it's full of the same kinds of people, the new, like, power-hungry people, and they start attacking them, or they merge into a bigger entity and they make that bigger entity have a problem with another entity and the Blue Donut falls apart. And there's this cycle of war because of that. And you kind of talked about it best, Matterall, when you talk about how it's a continuum and the same people are always involved in the wars. And those people are the people who came from Earth and Beyond. You know, NC Dot has always been a big part of driving wars. Same with Goons. And they have those cultural influences. And Serenity doesn't.
Can we? Is that something you would agree with, Spirit?
Somewhat. Yeah. I never play on the Serenity server, but I had a long discussion with the Alliance Corporation CEO there, and basically I tried to. At the beginning, I tried to get them into a comfortable place here on Tranquility, right? So I tried to learn how they would like to play the game, how they see the game, and what is fun to them, what is not. So it began with several conversations with the main FC on Tranquility. On Serenity. So they talk about some things about how do I put it? They're saying that the fights here on Tranquility is not as engaging as the ones in Serenity. So I kind of asked them why, and I go into detail. And then I even follow them into fights and then see how they perform against, Goon Fleet and then Test Fleet and things like that. And definitely, there are quite a lot of brilliant FC on Serenity server that have been performing extremely well. So when you're fighting Fraternity or fighting our coalition during the past 8 to 10 months, if you are fighting us in a constant basis, you will see a big variation of how do I put it? The fleet. Basically, sometimes we fight extremely well, and sometimes we're like idiots. I won't compare to particular alliance here on Tranquility, but yes, that's because we have been, or at least me and a few of my friends have been inviting FC, not just a person, but FC teams from Serenity to come and try their hand on Tranquility. Back in before last year, because we didn't snowball the population big enough, there was only maybe up to 100-man fleet they can form and fight with. Now they can basically try out more different things. We can form, like I said, 2 max fleet right now, and slowly we are getting the skill point to get into better ships. So these FC teams, a group of players, are more willing to come to Tranquility and then participate in these big fights. And I will have to say, they perform brilliantly, very different from how the fleets here were run. Because I was in BOB, I was in many big alliances, and I was basically fighting with a lot of the very famous FC here. And I would say that in just straight comparison, many of these Chinese FC have an edge compared to FC here on Tranquility. And if you want to go into detail, I can make some example, but I'm not sure what is the time limit here for.
Oh, we're good. We'll go into examples, but
not sure
Jin'Taan,
if it's. I'm just saying it's not. I'm not sure it would be a good idea for you to talk about general strategy or tactics. If you've got your own if you've developed your own style in the Chinese server, because that's something that you would want to keep secret, I think.
It's not. It's actually, I'm talking about not just one particular tactic. It's more on how they learn to fight. It's just completely different from Tranquility. Because
Yeah, let's
like
go
I
into
said,
that.
Yeah, definitely. Let's go into this. I've not heard about this. I'm fucking in. Let's go.
Because Serenity has a broken economy system, like many of you guys already know a little bit. The software is broken, right? So people get to just constantly be in production. So the moons are mining, or the software people ratting, and bolting is legal on the Chinese server. So a lot of bots are, botting. So you have this huge and very fast of asset accumulation on the Serenity compared to Tranquility. So Tranquility, you get to, at least when I played back in, around 2010, 2012, people get breaks, but they have to go to war. And during war, they don't get to do ratting for 5-10 hours a day. But on Chinese server, it's been constantly doing that since the server launch, because there's not that many major soft conflicts. So, and the soft mechanics, like I said, was broken. So there's a lot of accumulation of asset, but they're not being digested because there's no drive into these big wars. So in order to solve that problem, the businessmen on the server kind of come together and say that, okay, we have a bunch of these moon goods that we can make into zealots and, eagles and all those Tech 2 ships. But if there's no war, there's no way for us to profit from it, right? So they start to hire FC. They start to train FC with real life money. So many of these FC are paid in cash in real life to lead fleets. People still like to, fight, right? So they would pay to lead fleet into fights, into this kind of more like arranged fight against each other, just so that this kind of products can be blown up and then turn into is, and then turn into other values. So these FC are extremely good at fighting this kind of range fight. And like I previously said, I think a month or 2 months ago, while the try Keepstar was being on the final timer, I said that compared to Tranquility, Serenity FC is more like Olympic athletes, and the Tranquility FCs are more like warriors on real battles. So it's not comparison. It's not saying that one is better than the other. It's more saying that, okay, definitely if you have a soldier running in circles on an Olympic competition field, then the soldier will probably lose. But if you put this kind of Olympic athlete on the battlefield, have them carry 50 pounds of gears and then run through a field, being shot and bombed at, they probably won't do too good either. It's just completely different style.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, I love it. I'd love to do something about Serenity at some point.
So if you want me to go into a little bit detail about this, how they're different in terms of really tactics, they even have, and I'm not kidding, they have like mathematic calculation to the digits about what ship should be engaged against another fleet at what range, because they are getting this fight day in and day out, constantly basis, like, I don't know, just random, 300 million shooting at 300 zealot. So when you do that often enough, and you are one of the FC, and let's say I am one of the FC on the other team, so we both kind of develop a bunch of people that will be helping us on that fight, and we all know exactly what we are doing, and then everything is kind of calculated to win that fight. And that is just not happening often enough on the Tranquility server, because here we're fighting a real war. We're always trying to be more, the risk factor is always calculated in. But on the Chinese server, it's not. It's just like, shooting down a line on an Olympic, competition field. So they develop this kind of sixth sense on how to do an engagement against other ships. So when they come onto the Tranquility server and I follow their fleet, they have some kind of weird setup for some of the fleet. And then the FC were so confident going into a fight that I'm not sure that I can win. But they are saying that, oh, don't worry, I've been doing this kind of, day in, day out for 5 years. And they go in, they just blow up the entire other side of the fleet. We had this, if you remember, there was this alliance called Gorgon Empire. They're pretty good PvPers, right? They're considered the better part of the Russians, right? And I remember fighting them when I was in AAA and some other alliance. They are just like close. I'm not sure if they should be compared to like Black Legion stuff, but they're quite up there when you are talking about medium-sized scale combat. They really have experienced FC, experienced combat, and these FC from Chinese server come in. And we are both in Macarius, and the Chinese server FC blow the other fleet entirely, annihilated the Gorgon Empire fleet, like 70-2. That was just ridiculous. Like kill 70 Macarius and lose like 2 Macarius, and in some weird shit fit, and use some weird shit tactics, and I say that wow, it really works.
Yeah, I got to say it's really interesting there. The point about the industry feeding into how FCs learn. And then you talked about how everyone's using the same ships constantly. Do you think that because of the focus on industry in the Chinese server, that means that there's less room to innovate in the meta compared to Tranquility, which causes a lot of these fights to be very similar, which allows this development of very, very niche tactics?
I would say that the biggest impact on this is that many of these players don't have to worry about this ship losses, both the FC and the players. On Chinese server, especially in the last 3-4 years, if you get into the game, let's say you never play the game, you start up a new account, you get into the game, and there will be corporation talk to you that try to hire you into their group, and then they will give you an entire set of skill book worth billions, and then they will give you free ships and all these kind of things for free, just so you can fly under their banners. Because this wealth accumulation is just not a problem on the Chinese server. So these FC get to have this kind of perfect war against each other. They don't have to worry about whether they have to pay the SRP tomorrow. None of these things matter to them. They just have to go out there and win the fight. And they do this day in, day out for many years. That's why they develop this kind of, like I said, sixth sense of competition, fighting. And that is just, I haven't seen it exist yet on the Tranquility server.
Yeah, it's just so weird for me, because if I was in a position where I had infinite resources, I would be trying new things constantly. I would be consistently trying to innovate with my line members. But it sounds like that's not something that the Serenity server is like predisposed to, and I'm trying to figure out why, because that's like something I've not heard of before.
You never heard about this kind of fight before?
No, if I knew that there was a server where I could get paid to be an FC, I would be on Serenity.
Well, you need to learn Chinese first.
Well, I mean, there is a kind of payment for FCs, right? Aren't there accounts paid for and comped by the Alliance and that sort of stuff? I mean, it's not money, but it is like, worry-free.
Providence campaign. I got paid $0. And
not a question.
No, they didn't pay for my subscription. My subscription is paid for me by CCP, and they never offered to give me anything. So that's life. Life outside of the very biggest of alliances is you get no support. I didn't even get SRP for my FC ships. That was fun.
Jesus. Well, we're talking a whole different bracket here than if you have a passive economy that constantly fuel experimental training and people getting paid to actually FC, which is first time I've heard of that too in real money. It's interesting.
Yeah. Well, when I asked them to come to Tranquility, many members kind of laugh at me. Why would they come without me paying them in real life. And I would say that I would just give it a try. Well, many of them, they come with my invitation, especially for the big fights. But I guess there are still definitely some FC from Serenity that are not into only the money. Because of how the server have been developed into, it's getting a little bit tricky to get quality fights. Whenever you go into Nelset space, you get jumped on by 50 titans, and that's not fun. So they seem to be also enjoying this kind of new challenge on Tranquility server as well, definitely.
Yeah. And it is funny, and I think Jinn'Taan kind of touched on it. We look at Serenity and we're like, well, that's a server because it's completely, dominated. There's one group that runs everything, and we think of that as a broken Eve. But I'm sure they look at us and they see it's like that's a volatile Eve where you can't ever really get, to the meat of the getting good at FCing and stuff. Because you're constantly on guard to protect your financial interest, constantly on guard to even arrange a good fight. It's just interesting that both these seem legitimate now, whereas we might have looked at Serenity and said that one was not legitimate, that one is classified, and we should really just be in a constant state of war.
You see what I mean, dude? Serenity's so fascinating.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So, Carneros, do you have something?
Yeah, switching for a second from FCing and military conflict to diplomacy, who would you consider to be your closest allies or friends to Winter? If Winter needed some help or wanted to do something interesting, to whom would they make a call? Would you call, because you used to be in Bob, would you call the like NC dot?
So you're talking about my personal preference, not the coalition.
No, well, I'm asking you.
Kind of the same, yeah.
Chabudoba, but I'm actually asking more about Winter. Who are Winter's friends?
Well, I want to become more and more independent. Back when we were 4 or 5 years ago, we were only able to form 50, 60 million fleets. So we don't have really that big of a choice. If we want to get space in Nelset, live in Nelset, then we have to be somewhat attached to a bigger coalition.
I know that. Amen.
But now I think that we have the luxury to become independent. And then I definitely think that if at the current moment, Tranquility lacks such a group that are willing to stay independent. And that's what I'm trying to achieve with Winter Coalition. I have strong relationship, definitely, with Pan Farm, with GOTG, even with Test to a certain extent. I'm not too familiar with the Goon leadership. I've been fighting Goon since I started playing the game back in 2007, 2008. I knew a lot of the major leadership right now. Whoever was running Eve 5 years ago is still, unfortunately, running it today. It must be very tiresome for them. It's definitely a stressful work. So I would say that, yeah, definitely NCPL will be someone that I will try to call upon. But right now I'm trying to do it less and less because, to be frankly honest with all of you, I'm running dry on content. So whenever I get a chance to fight, I don't really want to share it with anyone. Unless, of course, it's in an off time zone for us, then we need more people to engage in a fight that we don't really have the chance to win by ourselves. Then definitely I call on to someone else. But I'm in the process of moving to become more and more independent.
I remember back in the day, Pangu used to be part of the N3 coalition, if I'm remembering correctly, or at least aligned with them. Do you think that's why you have retain good relationships with NC and PL?
Yeah, definitely. Our first Chinese system or station in Nelset was given by PL and N3. basically. So that was a really a graceful thing for them to do. But again, I was considering that also one of the worst decisions I have made while running the alliance, because we lived in Amencia for 4 months, and that was already, to me, too far into the null set, and it's very difficult to keep an active PvP player base in that area without having the FCD constantly arrange deployment somewhere else, and that kind of put too much stress on our leadership team. So that from that point on forward, I always try to position my alliance and my coalition close to the NPC null set too, so the things can move more in rhythm without the leaders have to be always online to arrange fights or try to trigger fights.
I'm curious too, because you mentioned a lot about wanting to make sure that there's fights, and Serenity, they kind of manufacture these fights and everything. And I'm really curious what wormhole space is like on the other servers or in the other time zones. We don't run into a lot of Asia time zone people in wormholes. There's a pretty substantial Russian and presence in wormholes, but some of the attitudes that you're talking about in your alliance in Null really remind me of some of the attitude of wormhole space, and I'm really curious how wormholes are from your perspective, and especially in Serenity.
From what I heard, it was just run by 2 alliance. Basically, that's the only 2 alliance that was in Serenity that happened to be running things in wormhole, and they control the entire Tech 3 protection. And one of that alliance is in my coalition right now. So they basically gave up their that alliance basically anchor and online the first Keepstar on Serenity. And when that Keepstar went down, they didn't even bother to defend it because they were too busy here on Tranquility. They are still building the alliance here. So,
so you guys are wormhole capable.
We have a wormhole cooperation, which is not related to the alliance. The alliance that were in wormhole back in Serenity here decided they will not go into wormhole, but they will try to do something else in Nelsec. So they're not involved in wormhole anymore.
I will say that's kind of weird, and you should probably look into getting them back into it, because a lot of large alliances right now are starting to see the value in having large-scale wormhole organizations under their banner, just due to the mobility it provides. I know Test does a lot of stuff with wormholes. I know PL has historically had a huge part of that, and even Rooks and Kings back in the day. But I do have one extra question for you. I completely forgot about earlier. Should have asked way earlier. It's I know that Fraternity, or I've heard at least, that Fraternity has a large population of alphas. Can you talk about that at all? How do you guys use alpha characters in your alliance?
I don't have any statistic information about that. I think the alpha-based player is not that big. Not to me, because many of them are using skill injectors and getting to bigger ship. No, I don't think there's that big. Maybe there's a few player who is abusing some game mechanics and use alpha characters, a lot of them, to do some weird stuff. But the major players, when they stay for longer than a month, they definitely go into Omega account. They're not staying in alphas.
Okay, well, I had some bad information there, but I'd heard that you guys were using a lot of the alpha changes, and that was kind of the impetus for a lot of Chinese players to come over, because they could just freely try it. Is that something that you found to be the case, or?
I think definitely it's a plus for the Chinese player, but I think the ratio of alpha account is definitely bigger outside of our coalition. I mean, in Goons or in other places, because I think because when player choose to come to Winter Coalition, basically this is mentioned on the Chinese form. Okay, if they choose to join our coalition, they're choosing a rough life. if they want an easy life, they can go elsewhere in Eve, which is, they will be under a super cap umbrella, and everything is relatively safe to do. If they choose a Winter Coalition, they're choosing a much more engaging, much more dangerous Eve career, and that's, I think, how the game should be played. So these players, when they join us, they're prepared to go much more deeper instead of playing just on the surface of the game. So as a coalition, we have a much smaller ratio of this alpha account compared to other places.
All right, we're going to ask you some hard questions, and then we'll move on to some news. We're going to go a little long. We're getting such interesting information from Windspirits, again, who is the CEO of Fraternity. And actually, it's now the Winter Coalition, which has a variety of groups, most of them Asian. But let's talk about the thing about Serenity. Is there a lot of RMT and money being, because it's a different type of server in that it's kind of a pacified economy. So are people actually? Let's see the bunny, by the way, because people are asking for it. Funny enough, people are also asking if they can marry you and stuff like that, which is really hilarious.
Send me your pictures. Well, I'm married already.
Good answer. So yeah, is there RMT? Is that a thing, or is it something that's kind of not talked about and exists, or does it not exist?
On Serenity?
Yeah. Well, you didn't play Serenity, but I'm wondering culturally if that's a thing that you're labeled with, or something you deal with in any way.
Yeah, it's part of the mechanics. It's allowed on Serenity, RMT. So
RMT is, or botting? Botting is
both
RMT.
botting and RMT is allowed. All the Chinese MMORPG are RMT. It doesn't make sense for them to play a game that's not RMTable.
Wow.
Right.
So let me just give you a perspective. Let me see. I think, of course, if there's some Chinese members that can correct me, I think you can buy 20-30 billion ISK on Serenity for the cost of $3 maybe.
It's worth noting that 20 to 30 billion is a lot less, considering I believe a Plex is 24 billion or something like that when I last checked.
Yeah. So still, but think about it. If you don't bolt and you're just on Serenity for the PvP content, there's absolutely no reason you should go raiding. I mean, even the salary level here is low. Many people will still just rather spend $50-$60 and buy, 80 billion this, and then just go out there and fight. So it's not necessary unless they're bolting. If you don't bolt, there's usually not that much of a point to go into PvE. Maybe just for the fun of it, but definitely not for the wealth accumulation.
Yeah. So that people know, RMT is real money trading, and it basically means that you can cash out. So if you earn a lot of money in the game, you can sell it for real money in real life. And so accumulating wealth allows you to actually, make money.
Yeah,
it's not allowed.
That's where the FC salary was paid from, basically. I pay, let's say, Jin 1,000 or 2,000 USD a month to FC, so I can sell the 200 R64 moons that I produce every month. And
BRB, I'm learning Chinese.
Yeah, I will pay you to blow up my stuff so I can cash them out and pay you again.
What the fuck, man? We're missing out all this fucking time. God damn.
You've wasted your life on tranquility. You should
could have made so much money as a shitting 14-year-old. All I had to do is learn Chinese.
Oh, that's really interesting. Okay, the other. So RMT is allowed, and it's a way of life, and people get paid to FC, and that allows a different culture of FCs to emerge that are quite good, like Olympic athletes. All this is super interesting.
Yeah. To add on to that, just a tiny bit of information. They're good once you put them on a grid with the right ships in their disposal, but they're not good at finding fights. So that's the biggest problem for them. And it's for basically all the Chinese FC. There's maybe, I'm not considering myself a very good FC. At least for now, I don't really have to FC that much because there are a lot of FC that can take my place. But like I said, many of these FC, they're just not good at finding content here on Tranquility server. So they're basically blind. I need to help them seek more content, get into bigger content. So that's a plus or minus. That's why I compare them as Olympic athlete. And you guys are the real warriors. You guys, do dirty works just to win the fight, but they are just standing there, always kind of assuming a fair fight in that kind of sense. So they are not.
That's where you come in, though, and that's what you provide is the connections and you break through the language barrier and you help organize and you provide content for these guys.
Yeah, language is one thing. I guess I know how to trigger those bigger content, like the war we fought in 2017. So getting into that war basically quadruple our population in less than 4 months. We were running 120-man fleet at the beginning when I came back. And then when I went AFK back in November, we were forming almost 2 max fleet. So,
yeah. One other question. So that you said something like when the Chinese show up to a fight, they presume a fair fight. So I wonder about the real warriors and how they trick and use every tool they have to win a fight that's not even just a fair fight kind of stuff. The meta politics for Chinese, how do you guys approach meta politics?
You mean how the politics goes in Serenity or?
Well, yeah, because and again, you're answering for Serenity. You're not a part of Serenity, but I wonder if you could give some insight on: do they have a metagame as strong as our metagame, where people talk about the game, write about the game, have like media about the game? Is all that over there too?
Yeah, definitely. Those childish fight you guys have on Redux, they have that too. Yes, definitely.
The Reddit fights, they have all this.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You talked about the Chinese Reddit. Are you telling me there's been Chinese shitposting that I've been missing this entire time? I need this. Can you link us the Chinese Reddit so that I can just start like bad posting using Google Translate?
Yeah, Google Translate is not gonna work that well.
Damn it.
Yeah, it's as exciting as the fights here on Reddit. Yes, I would say.
Do they use anime and memes and all that too? Have they heard of anime?
Yes, all kind of different. yes, many different kind of jokes and things like that. Some of the jokes I don't even get because I left China when I was 7, so many of the things I was still kind of trying to learn. Yeah, but definitely fun. I guess even more professional than the Redux here on global server, I'll say.
Yeah, I bet. The last question is, because you're familiar with China, how do they actually get to play Tranquility? Do they have to use a VPN to get on the server, or how hard is that for them?
I don't have to use it because I'm in Shanghai and I have some kind of I pay the telecom company extra money for this kind of direct line. But yes, when I move to other city for business meeting, I have difficult getting onto the server. And the problem is not consistent. It's sometimes you can get on, sometimes not. So definitely, I would say that many of these players, Chinese players, I guess a big portion of them are in the first tier city. So Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou. So they have more direct access to the game. And finding a VPN is not difficult, but definitely it is a bigger barrier for some people to break through.
Oh, it's fascinating. Go ahead, Carneros.
No, it's been great having you come and talk to us. We don't communicate as well with the Chinese players, and we always wonder, what they're thinking, and how do they like tranquility, and are they what do they think of the fight we just had, and it's always a mystery to us. So it's great to stop and talk to you. And I can speak a little Chinese, and I have a Chinese corp in my alliance, and I can talk to them. But it's still great to get a perspective from someone who can talk about it so well.
Oh, wait, sorry. Which alliance are you in?
It's called the Bastion. It's a ally with Goonswarm in the Imperium Coalition. If you just look at numbers of players in nullsec, it's somewhere around number 8, 9, 10. So pretty good size.
Okay, that's good. So you guys you have a Chinese corporation in your alliance.
Yeah,
that's good.
Carneros, why do you know Chinese? What happened there?
Oh, I just years ago, I have a degree in modern Chinese history, and I specialized in China in the 1980s. And I lived for a while in Beijing and attended a university there. It seemed like a good idea at the time.
I think it probably was.
So did you find a Chinese wife to marry?
No, 还没有结婚.
Oh, but definitely you dated a lot of Chinese women. That's where usually you learn your Chinese from, right?
I dated a Serbian woman who attended the same university I attended and who spoke flawless Chinese. She was fantastic. That was many years ago.
Wow.
Well, Wind Spirits, thanks very much for talking us through all this stuff. You definitely picked up a lot of fans in the chat channel, which is it's unusual. I usually don't see that sort of reaction, that people are having a strong reaction to you.
Where is the chat channel? I don't even know. Can you send me
and you can see it on the replay of this video. It'll be
all right,
on the right hand side, because a lot of that stuff passed. But we are going to, I know it's really late for you, so you can take off if you need to, but we're going to stick around and talk a little bit about news, because 5 Titans got killed. So a bunch of stuff. So anyway, first we're going to do a little commercial. I am again over at my brother's ranch, and we have these giant honey things, bottles of honey. So I wanted to show you the difference between alfalfa honey, because he has a bunch of bees, because he has a ranch of a lot of plums and fruit and stuff. So he has these things pollinate. Pretty cool, though. This is wildflower, this is citrus. So I didn't know this, but honey comes in different, it depends on what the bees are eating, and that's what they produce, because honey is basically bee spit, I think.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, and so these guys are huge, and there's vats and vats of it next to me. So that's where I'm at. I just wanted to show off the honey because I love it.
Okay. Sponsor for TIS. Honey.
Yeah, we're sponsored by honey, Matterall honey. Yeah, the trophy there, as we said earlier, is participation at INN trophy. I don't actually know what that is back there. All right, let's move on, because other stuff happened. Wow, Carneros, you were giggling and shooting Titans earlier. Do you want to tell us about that?
That was a lot of fun. I actually walked away from that with a little bit of advice for the player who's just getting to the super capital combat stage of E. Now, if you're an old-time super cap pilot, this is nothing new to you. But if you're just getting there, I have a couple words of advice for you. First of all, there are no bad Titans. All Titans are great. Every Titan is a fantastic ship hull to start with. But if you're really, really nervous about being primaried, you should probably pick an Avatar over an Erebus. Because the FCs were primarying Erebuses first. Also, you don't want to be the closest one to the hostile fleet because distance matters. So try to move your ship. I know they don't move very fast. I know they move like a tuna boat, but try to move them away from the bad guys because you don't want to be too close to them. Just, things to think about in your first fight when you're thinking about other stuff.
Well, I did go and listen to the meta show, and also I saw through INN that as the feeds were coming in. I mean, this is a big fight. Losses on both sides. Almost 1 trillion ISK lost in one fight. But the meta show, they basically explained what happened, but they also took a lot of time to make fun of Guardians of the Galaxy and stuff. So listen with that.
Making fun of people. Gosh, that's never happened before.
They spend a lot of time ridiculing their enemy, and I guess people like that. But essentially, does anyone know like how that went down, or even why it went down?
Yeah, I mean, I do. Okay. So they had identified an opportunity where these folks were using their super caps freely. And anytime anyone's using them freely and predictably over a period of time, there's an opportunity there to set something up. So they prepared, a dread cache, and they called a few friends and said, "Hey, do you want to get in on an opportunity?" And they set up anyway, they went with a bait structure of some sort. I don't even know what it was. Might have been a Raitaru. No one paid any attention to the structure the whole time. It was just there to be the marker for where and when the fight happened. And we waited till they dropped some folks in. The fact that when they did drop their Titans, they bounced a lot didn't really matter because we were going to do this anyway. But the bouncing did present some opportunity because one guy bounced way one direction and a couple other guys bounced way the exact opposite direction, which is, always a lot of fun to see.
Which is
but
yikes.
The first guy that bounced off this direction, he followed the rule of the squeaky wheel gets all the grease. So what he did was he spoke up on comms, asked for some help, lit a Sino, and they dropped the faxes over by him out here in basically Egypt. And
far away.
So we saw that, and we went over here to the main group and lit our Sino there and bubbled there and jumped our dreads in there. And our dreads were close range fit. So we wanted to be close to these guys. And the fact that most of the faxes were a long way off meant that they couldn't really effectively save the ones that were right close to us. A few faxes showed up close to us, and what we did was we put all our capital newts on the faxes and otherwise more or less ignored them and focused on the Titans. And then after we got a few Titans down and they were starting to bring in folks who could hurt us, and they were using Doomsdays and taking out dreads. Then we started to say, okay, now let's target. We started to go for a Nyx, but then changed our mind on that too, and just went for like other dreads and faxes for a bit. And while we were waiting for our siege cycle to end, so we could jump back out.
So
it was a lot of fun.
You just really went for it because maybe the assumption was that they're going to attack this lone Titan out here because it'll be easy to kill. But instead, and they defended that with their logistics.
He was in no danger.
You guys went for the pack. You
Well,
went for
Yeah, there was the intention here was kill some Titans and sacrifice a dread fleet to the gods. That was all. We were actually, none of us expected to get out. My name starts with a C, and I'm there on my main character, and I'm reasonably famous in Eve. I did not expect to get out alive. No. But yeah, I jumped back out and handed my Titan back and said thank you very much. And none of us expected.
handed your dread back.
Handed the dread back. Yeah,
You weren't
it's a
in
lot of
Titan.
fun. No. I was in a Naglfar.
Yeah, and I think you guys were able to I think 100 and something, or I don't know, 150 dreads were dropped. That's a lot for that.
The dread fleet was full, and there were people complaining they couldn't get in. 256. Now they weren't all dreads. Some of them were in. There were a few faxes and a few carriers, but all the subcaps were in a different fleet. It was a good sized fleet.
Well, so that harassment campaign's been going on a few weeks, right? With Guardians of the Galaxies, you guys are really suppressing their ability to have a peaceful empire that can basically rat in peace, right?
Well, let's go back to what Windspirit said. Mm-hmm. Do you really want to move your alliance somewhere way back in a peaceful corner to just turn into nullbears? Or do you want them to, have some action and stuff to keep the PvPer sides happy? And I think we're providing a service.
Okay. All right, Carneros, you're gloating too. So now I want the straight.
I had
stuff.
A fun moment. I'm not gloating. I don't. I'm not. Right. I'm not the smug type.
I know.
It's fun.
But, it was fun for you to knock out 5 Titans. It is for anybody, especially with dreads that survive, which is unexpected. So that'll probably happen again. What is interesting, though, is there is a harassment campaign going on in the north. Is there not?
There is. Yes, I've heard rumors of special interest groups, SIGs, being posted up in places in the north. I'm not involved personally in any of those. I do fly with Space Violence on my lunch hour at work because they have mostly EU time zone actions, and I like that. But we've been out in Curse. I've actually flown in some actions against Fraternity. I didn't bring that up in the conversations, but those guys can be a lot of fun. And then sometimes they show up with like huge numbers, and we can't do anything. But yeah. But we're not pre-pinging CTAs or anything. We're just running around on lunchtime. Well, it's EU Prime.
Okay. So you actually have like 2 areas that you guys are hanging around and participating and harassing and that sort of thing.
There might be more than 2. I don't know. We have the same problem he has where we got a big group and we have to keep content for them or they'll all go to sleep. And we're doing it a little differently than he is, where we're splitting our guys up into smaller groups to go out because there are too many to fight all at once.
Yeah.
Plus, it's not fun. Who wants to pile all into tie-dye every time? And no. It's more fun, a little bit smaller.
Oh my god, guys! I have some breaking news.
Yeah.
Apparently, Hard Knocks just convinced someone to publicly post on the forums that they are accepting a rental agreement for a wormhole and publicly scammed them live.
Oh, that makes me sad.
That's so brutal. Oh,
Hard Knocks is not the same without Newman. Well, maybe they are the same.
They scammed me once years ago, not over a rental contract or anything, but I would use an inappropriate term to describe those gentlemen.
Boy, that's so fucking
which is saying something. Okay, another thing that's come up, speaking of wormholes, is there anything else? What's next for you, Keskora? You guys now making a transition
Yeah, so I mean, the biggest news out of Wormholes in a while has been my own alliance's eviction. These kind of evictions don't happen very often at all, and this was one of the biggest ones. I think that the total like destruction was like up to $1 trillion isk, which for Wormholes is just nuts. Like that's a lot. So the final structures fell yesterday. RIP. We had a big meeting to discuss our future and where we wanted to go, and everyone's been really supportive and really on ball. They posted that video, that audio to Reddit, which was great. The dank leaks.
Oh,
So hearing us like debating what we want to do and having all of Wormhole Space then weighing in on our decision has been super awesome for me. But we're we're in a good place, all together. We got evicted and that sucks, but the fights were epic and amazing, and we'll remember them for a long time. So now we're just focusing on rebuilding, and everyone's been so supportive and great and helpful. We've had, just so many people chipping in to rebuild us. It's been really great. I just love seeing everyone come together and help each other out, and it's been really good. It's kind of like, giving me a little bit more faith in Eve to see so many people, helping us out along the way.
You're not fail cascading that in misery.
No, we're doing great.
Cascading is your connection, Matt.
Yeah. I mean, when a big eviction like this happens, a lot of people assume that the next step is that the corp is going to fail. Like, they lose all their assets, so they can't maintain their integrity. But we, like a lot of us have met in real life. Whenever we go to Eve Vegas and the Eve meetups, we're usually one of the biggest groups of wormholers there in real life. And we have a lot of really close ties to each other. And so, before all of this happened, like my leadership, we all got together and had like a kumbaya moment. And we're like, well, Ember Sands possibly is not this hole. It's not our structures. It's not our ships. So, we can get a new hole and we can get new ships, but it's important that we stick together. And so, we're doing well, surprisingly. We just have to be careful. I'm not just going to say like everything's hunky dory and rainbows and unicorns and everything. Obviously it still sucks and we got a lot to do, but everyone's in pretty good spirits. So, I'm very optimistic about the future. And I know everybody's eager to get back in.
Oh, back in the Wormholes. Can you tell us where you're going to be, or secret? Were you able to hear me?
Okay, it seems the bees have come from Matterall here.
So I think he's asking us what class of wormhole we're going to, where we're going back into wormhole space, which has been the hot debate. A lot of groups want us to move up to C5 space because that's kind of seen as like the PvP playground, and we've always been a low class entity. So this was kind of like, is this the time we're going to move up? And we decided that the important part right now is that we need to rebuild, and we don't want to try to overextend ourselves when we're in a bit of a vulnerable place. So we're going to sit back up in a C4 for the time being. I still would like to move to a C5. I think that would be cool, and it's a change that I would like. But we need to focus on rebuilding right now, and trying to challenge us to compete up in that C5 playground is a little more than I wanted to push for right now. But there's plenty of time in the future. So,
but don't they win? According to, I'm listening to this thing that was posted on Reddit on your behalf. Don't they win if you go to a C5? Isn't that what they wanted?
I mean, the narratives are so all over the board. Like there's one narrative if we die, there's another if we kick certain people, there's another if we move to C5 space. It's hard to keep up with the narratives, honestly. So for me, I want to focus on what's best for my guys and for us. And we're all familiar with C4 space. We know how to operate in it. And so it's pretty much the best place we can go if we want to really rebuild and we want to rebuild quickly. We can always move wormholes again. I mean, I know it's a pain in the ass, moving always is, but it's totally viable. But I want to make sure that we have, the foundation to be able to rebuild as quickly and efficiently as possible so that we can get back to doing what we love to do, which is exploring and PvPing in wormholes. So yeah, some people are saying that like one of the big motivations for the eviction was to get us into C5 space, and some people are real adamant that they don't want to do that under, you know, the duress of the groups forcing us there. But you know, when I'm making a decision for my guys, I'm making it for us. I'm not trying to make it for what other people want. I mean, obviously, I got to pay attention to diplomatically where we are in the wormhole community, and I don't want us to get evicted again, obviously. But you know, I'm trying to think about what would be the best place for us to rebuild, because that's what we're doing right now. We're not trying to expand. We're trying to rebuild and reestablish. And so here we are for now, and there's plenty of time in the future, because I know we're going to be around for a long time.
Oh, cool. Well, good luck. We should probably move on to, we're wrapping up the show in a minute, but we do want to talk CSM, right? Jim?
Yeah, what was our final count for how many people went for it?
Right around 50, wasn't it?
I believe there are 52 applicants this year.
Yeah.
Which is, I believe, the exact same as applied for CSM 11, remembering. Or it was like, it was high 50s at least.
But they still haven't verified, have they? I mean, those applications need to go through.
The verification process will finish at FanFest, and you will know who you could vote for at FanFest, although I don't believe voting will start.
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway,
FanFest is effectively the start of the campaign season.
Right. So stations will probably be interviewed. This time, hopefully, it's not just me interviewing people, but maybe Keskora and Carneros will help out. And we'll try to get as many of those official candidates as possible. So we'll start after FanFest, but we'll do like 20-minute interviews with everybody who wants to be interviewed and bring those to you. So more about that in a bit. And it looks like Noisy says there's 53 candidates, so somebody must have snuck in there. It's 53 so far.
So close.
Yeah, you were close. And Noisy Gamer has a website. Yeah.
And it's worth pointing out that if you haven't been thinking too much about FanFest, it's not very far away. It's only like 18 days.
Oh my God, is that soon?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
man.
haven't even started my presentation yet, Rip in Pieces. I got to actually do that next week. Oh yeah, also I'm presenting at FanFest. Come watch my thing, or don't. I don't really mind.
What are you presenting on?
I'm going to be doing a Spheres of Influence 2. I'm going to be kind of going around Eve and just saying, hey, here's where people live. Here's who lives there. Because I think that's interesting to the kind of people who come to.
So it's your YouTube content, pretty much, live.
Yeah, Yin Talks live.
Wow. Well, that's great.
Thank you.
All right. One other thing I wanted to talk about, as long as we have a little extra time here, that is new players. Because I had a friend that was telling me about his new player pitfalls, and he just listed off like 5 or 6 places where you get lost. And I was wondering if you guys knew if there were any new player sensitive candidates out there. Does anybody cover new players? Or Jinn'Taan, you actually do it because you talk to what's his name, Ghost, right?
Yeah. No, I'm actually currently working on a new iteration of the original overview that you get in Eve. I'm trying to create one that's better without having the complexity that the ZS overview has. Because I tried for a while to give people in Rookie help the ZS overview, and it was just too much. Like, they couldn't handle the amount of complexity that added to the game. So I'm working on just a better default overview that I'm hoping CCP will bite on. Outside of myself, however, Yukiko has done excellent work talking to new players, but I don't know if he's rerunning this yet. There'll probably be one candidate who gets in who has some amount of experience helping new players, though. I think that's a given. And even if they don't, we have candidates with large quantities of new player organizations. You know, we have Areth and Innominate who can literally just ask Karma Fleet, which is the biggest.
That's not the representation talking about. Those guys.
Oh, you mean like a new player? No, a new player would
like,
be fucking awful on the CSM. If you do
No, I
not
know.
have 2 to 3 years of game time, you would be shit on CSM, to be blunt.
Yeah, but all the guys that are past 2 or 3 years, all the struggles that a new player would have, like, hey, my probes I logged off, my probes were in space, I come back and my probes are gone. Like, we're talking new player, because they seem to be missing a lot of holes of simple stuff, like the guy who loses his probes, buy them next, because he doesn't even know he can buy them in a market, much less where the market is, and all that kind of stuff. But maybe we'll save that for a different thing. I wanted to open up that topic. I'll put some concrete notes together on some of this stuff. But it really seems like it's just stuff that needs to be handed to CSM to be handed to CCP.
If you give me a list of all the fucking things that you think are wrong with the game, I will bring them up. I don't just sit on them.
Oh, of course, yeah. So that's the way
Same
to
with
do
everyone
it.
else on the CSM.
That new player aspect is part of why CCP asks every new member of the team, a CCP employee, to start all over again with a brand new character, to refresh themselves on what it's like. Unfortunately, that doesn't mean you've wiped all of your player knowledge of years of playing EVE when you go to start that. So you don't really have the equivalent experience of a brand new player, but it helps a little bit.
Yeah. Well, this is good. We have a new player. Yeah, jump into Discord. We'll can somebody post a Discord invite into chat channel? Come to TIS Discord and talk to us about your new player experience. We want to know about it. All the pitfalls that basically the places where you get stuck, because that's anytime you get stuck.
Yeah. If you actually have places where you can get stuck in the new player experience, seriously send that to me and I will forward it to the devs involved with that. They're very, very big on trying to find those sorts of things.
Yeah.
I prefer step-by-step reproductions because that's how CCP checks them, if possible.
Well, however, I just want to have a discussion about it because I feel like those are all the roadblocks. And I don't want to hear the stuff like, we have to join a corporation first or any of that kind of stuff, because really you don't join a corporation until you feel like investing in the game. And some people aren't even getting to that point. They don't want to invest in a game where they get stuck every 5 minutes and have absolutely no way of figuring out how to continue. So, yeah. All right, we'll do a show on that. That would be good. But we'll wrap up this show. Is there anything you guys wanted to say to get off your mind? If not, I will say once again, I'm in bee country because my brother owns a bunch of beehives, and this is alfalfa and wildflower, and this is what is this? Citrus. See how different they are? These are massive.
It has nothing to do with green swarm.
Is this your bee facts? Is this going to be your new thing? Are you going to end every show with a bee fact or honey fact?
Considering we don't have a sponsor, yeah, I'm using this as a commercial. But yeah, those are bees. That's as close as I get to bees. I get to bees in real life.
You can't escape
not so
the
much
bees.
In the game. Yeah. All right, but thanks for showing up. Sorry about some of the technical things. Again, I'm doing this show remotely. I expected to be home, but my family convinced me to stick around another day, which I'm appreciative of. But it's nice that you guys joined us. Carneros, Keskora, Jinn'Taan, thanks for coming on. And of course, Wind Spirits, who had to leave us because it was more past midnight over where he was. So thank him for coming on as late as he did. If that's everything, then we will say goodbye for this week and see you next week on Talking in Stations.
Bye, everybody.
That was a great episode.